This week, the Rough Guide comes to you from Havana.
A city where time seems to have stood still.
Frozen in the moment on New Year's Day 1959, when the revolutionary hero Fidel Castro
overthrew the corrupt leaders, pimps and mafiosi
who had turned the city into one of the most notorious playgrounds in the world
and instituted one of the strictest communist regimes
in existence.
Havana is now a place where people
drive old American cars,
eat a lot of ice cream
and lock up anyone who has AIDS.
La muscura está en el suelo, mamá, no puedo con ella. Me la llevo a la cabeza y mamá, no puedo con ella. La muscura está en el suelo, mamá, no puedo con ella. Me la llevo a la cabeza y mamá, no puedo con ella. Y es que no puedo con ella, mamá, no puedo con ella. Y es que no puedo con ella, mamá, no puedo con ella.
How do you keep a revolution going for over 30 years? That's the question which is exercising the old guard here these days. A whole new generation has grown up who can't remember the bad old days before the revolution and who are more concerned about the frustrations of the present. Only 1 in 5 young Cubans belongs to the UJC, that's the Union of Young Communists. Being a good comrade, it seems, isn't nearly as much fun as it used to be. So the government is now laying on a series of red wedge-style jamborees to ensure the loyalty of the young masses. Aren't these concerts basically an attempt to claw back the support of young people who've become alienated from the revolution?
Uno puede expresarse ante un discurso, ante formas que quizá en su momento abusamos de ellas y resultaron algo aburridas para la juventud en general, y en particular empezamos a notar que sobre todo los jóvenes adolescentes que no vivieron determinadas etapas y que a lo largo de su vida han visto repetirse métodos similares en el trabajo juvenil, les llegaba menos el mensaje que queríamos dar. Yo creo que es un intento de refrescar esos métodos y de en una coyuntura muy especial de agresión, de tensión, etcétera, lograr que la gente se exprese de una manera alegre, espontánea, como son los jóvenes.
Is it enough to offer people headbands, slogans, and a bit of pop music, when it seems to us what they really want are more consumer goods, freedom of expression, and the right to travel?
Yo diría que es cierto que nos faltan bienes de consumo. Sin embargo, no solo el consumo expresa determinado nivel de vida. Yo creo que los jóvenes nuestros son conscientes de que antes de resolver determinados efectos electrónicos, de que antes de resolver ropa de última moda, cosméticos, etcétera, hay que asegurar los derechos fundamentales, desde el derecho a la vida hasta el derecho a la educación, el derecho a la salud, el derecho al trabajo, el derecho a una vivienda decorosa.
Hurricanes are a regular event in this part of the Caribbean, and the political hurricane which swept through East Europe is unlikely to pass Cuba by. The unthinkable is already happening, as young Cubanos are increasingly demanding to have their voices heard, and the very brave even dare to whisper in dark corners about the succession to the maximum leader, Fidel himself.
The Cuban government are currently desperate to attract foreigners to the island, especially if they've got wads of hard currency clenched in each fist. And they do want to look after you when you get here. They've even passed a law that says a local can be fined if a tourist reports them for bad service. Excuse me.
The concept of service may still be a little alien to Cuba, but the concept of hedonism certainly isn't. The Playa del Este is the place to be on a sunny Sunday afternoon. And this is where you have to junk any silly ideas you've brought with you. You know, about communist societies being drab, lifeless, and unfriendly places. Havana is not Little Moscow by the sea. And even if perestroika hasn't reached here yet, hip-hop surely has.
Quite like I can. I take a muscle-bound man and put his face in the sand. Not the last mafioso, I'm an MC cop. Make it say go LL and do the what?
In fact, it seems as if the only way to attract attention on this island is to do as the locals do.
What can I say? It's a beach. It's a very lively beach. And there are an awful lot of tents on it. Let's just have a look at and see what's going on in here. Perdón. Well, they certainly weren't studying the finer points of Marxist polemic. Down at the beach, as a foreigner, you're bound to attract attention, so it won't be hard starting up a conversation. Trouble is, you might just find it a little difficult stopping it. ¿Vienes aquí mucho?
Sí, vengo todos los fines de semana, ya que es un lugar maravilloso en el cual nos podemos encontrar y reunirnos todos los jóvenes aquí de La Habana cuando es tan maravilloso.
But the concept of service with a smile hasn't quite reached the shop floor. But who cares? You might not get the service, but you always get the smile.
Yo escucho música y me relaciono con los demás. ¿Ok?
Nos bajamos a nos bebemos la tarde aquí ahora mismo. ¿Qué es lo que pasa? Saca lo que tengo encima, que yo no te tengo miedo a ti. Todo el mundo te tiene miedo en La Habana, caballero, pero yo no. A mí no me importa que tú tengas 7 pies. ¿Qué es lo que pasa? ¿Qué es lo que pasa, Guatú? Conmigo no, porque yo de los guapos me río.
Havana is a very picturesque city, but it's also a city which has been falling down for the past 30 years. Ever since the revolution, Cuba has put all its spare pesos into the countryside and allowed its staggering capital city to literally collapse around its ears. Thousand Cubans also live in the old city, and because there's an acute shortage of housing, some of them are living in the most appallingly cramped conditions.
Me llamo Virginia González, esta es mi casa. Aquí les voy a enseñar la sala de mi casa, que es esta. Aquí vemos la televisión. Esta es mi mamá, se encuentra viendo la televisión. Aquí algunos afiches que ven es un regalo que mi hermano le ha mandado a mi mamá, mi hermano que está en los Estados Unidos. Estos son los juguetes de mi hija. Aquí vemos el comedor de mi casa, donde comemos. Este cake que ven aquí es por el cumpleaños de mi sobrina, que cumple 5 añitos hoy, y se lo vamos a celebrar aquí en la casa. Este es el patio donde lavamos. Aquí es donde lavamos la ropa. Este es el cuarto donde dormimos mi hermana, la sobrina mía, que es la hija de mi hermana, y esta que es mi hija.
What would you say were the worst problems about living like this, the things that you find the hardest to bear?
Bueno, uno de los mayores deseos que yo quisiera es vivir con mi hija y con mi esposo solo, porque en sí no tenemos privacidad, es verdad. Él vive en su casa, yo vivo aquí en mi casa, y ya llevamos tiempo, llevamos ya casi 5 años, y no hemos podido vivir juntos. Hay veces que él ha estado aquí en mi casa, se ha pasado días, ¿no? Pero aquí no puede estar.
Ese salto sin espectacularidad, pero con pasos firmes y seguros.
Con la entrega de banderas.
Como yo, hay otra gente que también tienen el mismo problema, no igual o parecido o igual, que a lo mejor tiene su esposo pero no pueden tener hijos porque viven en un lugar que la madre o la suegra no quiere que tengan hijos. Y así quisieran tener hijos y no pueden porque no viven solos.
Just how free are you to travel as a tourist?
Very, very free. You can either rent a car and visit all the provinces, all towns, all cities, or go in package tours, which are usually less expensive.
And just how difficult is it to meet ordinary Cubans? Are there any restrictions on them?
It is not difficult at all. You can walk out there and meet Cuban people. You can mingle there in the streets and know how they live, what they think.
There's a sort of tourist apartheid which operates here in Havana, and locals who break the rules do so at their peril. Cubans aren't allowed into tourist hotels unless they're with a foreigner, and Havana's top restaurants and shops will only accept dollars, and Cubans can be jailed if found in possession of hard currency. This is a graphic, if petty, example of the way this segregation works. A Cuban wouldn't be allowed to hire this taxi, but I can. Walking around Havana, you often get the feeling that you've been transported into a 50s time warp. In San Rafael, the main shopping street, most of the window displays look as if they haven't been changed for decades, and they probably haven't.
Está loca, dale huevo. Está loca, está loca, está loca, dale huevo.
You'll see that even with a wallet full of pesos, Cubans are given very little choice about what to spend their money on. So the system neatly divides those with dollars and those without into the haves and the have-nots. But if you're a foreigner, you can shop in far more glamorous locations. And if you know where to look, you can even get hold of the Cuban equivalent of haute couture. certain things that you can buy because you've got more money that most ordinary Cubans wouldn't actually be able to get hold of?
Bueno, mira, hay cosas que yo puedo comprar que no están a la vista, no los venden, no están en las vidrieras. Y esas cosas cuestan muchísimo dinero. Por ejemplo, el maquillaje, por ejemplo, zapatos, por ejemplo, vestidos. Y en eso gasto casi mi 90% de mi salario.
Is there anything you particularly want to buy here, which however much money you have, you just wouldn't be able to get hold of here?
Mira, por ejemplo, a mí me gustaría poder rentarme una casa, un apartamento, en un lugar cómodo y agradable. Yo no lo puedo hacer.
You've got quite a lot of foreign friends. Why is it that young Cubans seem very attracted towards making friendships with foreigners?
Porque muchos cubanos, por ejemplo, no han tenido la oportunidad de salir de Cuba. Y entonces conocer a un extranjero le parece como algo, como una fuente de información, como una fuente de saber lo que pasa afuera, de saber cómo se viste la gente, cómo camina la gente, qué come la gente, de qué vive la gente que está fuera de Cuba. Hay muchos cubanos que también andan con extranjeros para tener estos vínculos materiales y tener acceso a restaurantes, a lugares turísticos que por alguna razón u otra los cubanos no podemos entrar.
How do you feel that as a Cuban in your own country there are certain places that you don't have access to which foreigners can go into?
Mal.
Detrás del bohío, en la arboleda frondosa, se oye el triste murmurío del arroyo, las hojas caen la enramada. Una amorosa alborada. Amanece un nuevo día de viva luz matizado, siempre el aire su alegría por el monte y por el prado. Ay, desde lo alto de la montaña el sol ya baña la dulce caña con su fulgor. Ya comienza su faena el guajiro laborioso y del gallo victorioso el clarín estrepitoso anuncia el viento la mañana. Despierta ya, mi dulce amor. Oh.
To this day, Cubans are encouraged to see America as a great decadent Satan that can't mind its own business. And this gives Fidel endless opportunity to distract the people from their real problems and unite them against a common enemy. But while many people seem to enjoy the game of spouting anti-US rhetoric, in reality, some Cubans would actually like to live in America, although they'd be extremely wary about broadcasting those kind of views too loudly. Their willingness to fight is more than just symbolic. It's the Cuban Army's proud boast that if the Americans were to try and invade the island, at least 250,000 of them would be killed in the process.
Socialismo o muerte, patria o muerte, venceremos.
Increasingly, Cuba stands alone as a hardline communist state, rejecting even Soviet pressure for change. The propaganda posters and hoardings which have sprung up all over Havana bear witness to Castro's defiant mood. No perestroika. Committed Western socialists might find Fidel's latest slogan just slightly over the top. Socialismo o muerte!
55 Ford died right on the road. Road for the could, raised up the hood. Couldn't see nothing wrong. Line of cars long. Traffic bogged down. Trying to drive around. Officer Lamar walking toward the car. Move it, come along, move it. You cannot stop it here, now move it. Move it.
Este carro es de mi padre, entonces lo heredé yo porque como soy el único varón, y entonces estos carros son de antes. Ahora la gente joven no lo pueden tener porque ya son de muchos años, hace 33 años que lo tienen.
So how did you get all the little gadgets for the car?
Yo he tenido este carro sí porque yo tengo familia afuera, en Miami, y entonces ellos me mandan dólares y he comprado todas las cosas que he tenido sí. Pero ya eso no es permitible ya.
In England, having a car like this would be considered to be really hip and trendy. Is it the same thing here?
Sí, aquí en este país estos carros no tienen mucho valor ya, pero en otros países cuestan mucho. Y entonces si yo pudiera cambiarlo por un lado, lo cambiaba, porque el lado se puede tener por muchas posibilidades.
So in fact, there's virtually no way of getting off this island unless you're one of the good guys.
After about the 7th one, it all begins to make sense. But then there's the daiquiris to attend to.
If the thought of an ideologically sound night out doesn't thrill you, you can always come to the Tropical for a bit of bumping and grinding.
Hardly anyone in Cuba wears glasses. And that's not a sign that there's very few opticians here. It's actually a sign of how good the health service is, because anybody who needs it has access to high-tech laser surgery to correct their vision, and it's all for free. Showpiece hospitals like this one are held up by the maximum leader, Castro, as beacons of socialist achievement, and contrasted against the grubby materialism of the big enemy, America. In fact, it's one of Fidel's greatest boasts that life expectancy here is greater than in Florida, just 90 miles away. Cuba is a very healthy society, and it wants to stay that way. Given that sex is practically the national sport, AIDS is as yet a relatively small problem. The authorities think they found a solution. It's simple, and it only has a few drastic side effects on civil liberties. Anyone who's found to be HIV positive is detained for treatment at the Los Cocos Sanatorium on the outskirts of Havana, or here in the isolation ward at the Institute of Tropical Medicine. Effectively, it's a life sentence with no appeal, though inmates are on occasion allowed to go home in the company of a kind of sex policeman who makes sure that they don't infect anyone else. Doesn't your way of dealing with the AIDS problem amount to a basic infringement of human rights?
El concepto de deber individual y social un poco se explica a través de la historia de la salud pública en Cuba. En Cuba las personas hacen cosas por su salud que a lo mejor en el resto del mundo puede ser considerado un atentado contra los derechos de las personas. Cada país hace lo que estime conveniente en salud pública y nadie es quien para criticar lo que un país haga por preservar la salud de la población de su país.
Doesn't the suggestion that you can actually lock up something as complex as AIDS lead to a sense of complacency amongst young people?
Yo creo que sí, y no solo jóvenes. La población sexualmente activa puede tener una sensación de seguridad que yo considero que es falsa. Pero el riesgo existe. Como mismo existe el riesgo de que una persona se haga la prueba del VIH y que considere que después de haberse hecho esa prueba del VIH ya está vacunado contra el SIDA porque le dio negativa la prueba del VIH. Y no hay nada más falso. Y eso puede pasar con una frecuencia tremenda.
Most young Cubans are desperate to travel, but not on a one-way ticket. So in fact, there's virtually no way of getting off this island unless you're one of the good guys. Diplomats, the party faithful, and sportsmen often do get to see the world, but that's because the government trusts them to come back.
Al jardín izquierdo elevado, la busca el jardinero izquierdo, se está colocando debajo de la pelota, ahora parece que la perdió, va hacia atrás y la bola le cayó detrás, se va para segunda base Omar Linares y está arribando a segunda.
How much was the offer that was made to you by the States?
Bueno, la cantidad de ofertas que me hicieron los americanos, que yo recuerde, fueron $200,000 por firmar un cheque, es decir, en blanco, para que yo desertara del país y me pusiera a jugar profesionalismo en los Estados Unidos. Yo naturalmente no acepté porque siempre nosotros hemos jugado el béisbol para diversión del pueblo, que es el pasatiempo nacional también. Y nací con la revolución y no dejaría tampoco esto por nada del mundo.
Do you feel privileged that you've been allowed to travel in the way that you have with the sport?
Sí, yo me siento muy privilegiado por eso, puesto que a todos nosotros la televisión nos da confianza y tiene la plena seguridad en nosotros que no vamos a traicionarnos ni a desertar por nada del mundo. Esto nos da la oportunidad de lo grande que es la revolución y pienso que el partido y el gobierno tiene confianza en nosotros y por eso que nosotros nos sentimos tan privilegiados por eso.
Some might call it another fine example of the international neo-brutalist school of architecture. Many Cubans, though, would like to call it home. This estate, like many others in Havana, is the work of the microbrigadas, or microbrigades, a uniquely Cuban way of dealing with the country's housing crisis. It's also a system which gives a whole new meaning to the word moonlighting. The microbrigades are voluntary. The theory is that while you're away from your proper job, your colleagues cover for you. The deal for them is that, like you, they too then get a priority place on the housing list. So aren't there cases when colleagues at work resent the fact that you're away on a microbrigade because it means they have to work harder?
No, no hay ningún descontento interno en la empresa porque esto es un acuerdo que se toma masivamente con todos los trabajadores del centro. Se les hace conocer cuál es la situación para que ese compañero pueda pasar al movimiento microbrigada y entonces si ellos acertan, el compañero puede salir, si no acertan, ellos no puede.
Since one of the main problems for young Habaneros is living on top of each other, when it comes to getting on top of one another for more intimate purposes, where do they go?
Never know how much I love you, never know how much I care. And when you put your arms around me, I get the fever that's so hard to bear. You give me fever. When you kiss me, fever, when you hold me tight.
But for those who crave slightly more comfort than the backseat of a Lada, there's always the Posada, a no-questions-asked love motel of the type perfected by the Japanese. But here, like everything else, it's provided by the state. So, like everything else, you'll have to queue for it. But if you're with someone that you shouldn't be, or quite simply get overcome by embarrassment, a quick fiver slipped into the right palm should help you take the waiting out of wanting. Who says you can't hurry love?
Everybody got the fever, that is something you all know. Tener fiebre no es de ahora, hace mucho tiempo que empezó yo.
Y hay veces que no sé, nos da pena, no a nosotros solos, a muchas parejas también. Nosotros, un ejemplo, somos esposos, a lo mejor otras parejas no son marido y mujer, son unos conocidos y quieren hacer el amor y quieren ir a una posada y a lo mejor, no sé, también les da pena porque a lo mejor los dos tienen compromiso o algo.
If you pay a bit over the odds, though, does it mean that you can jump to the front of the queue?
Sí, relativamente en casi toda la mayoría de las posadas, cuando hay mucha cola, porque, un ejemplo, son días... Hay días que hay tremendas colas, que hay más cola que nunca, porque es un día festivo, porque, no sé, un fin de semana, algo de eso, que la gente le gusta salir y no tiene donde hacer sus relaciones, eso, hay mucha cola. Y entonces los clientes que hacen, el que puede, paga 20 pesos, 10 pesos para poder entrar más rápido, y hay veces que hay tanta cola y hay tanta gente que los paga que ni los camareros ni te aceptan eso ya, porque es que ya no tienen para dar más cuartos.
In the morning, fever all through the night. Everybody got the fever.
Once inside, don't expect jacuzzis, mirrors on the ceiling, or illustrated prints of the Kama Sutra. State provision is about meeting basic needs, not providing satin sheets for decadent lovers. In this case, it's very basic, and sometimes not very clean. Another difference from the love hotels in Japan is that there they rent the rooms by the hour. Here, it's 3 hours. All things considered, I think I'd rather be in Havana.
Que aquí nosotros aprovechamos bien las 3 horas o las 4, las que sean necesarias, ¿no? Siempre y cuando el cuerpo lo pida.
In the morning, fever all through the night.
What's the best way of seeing Havana?
Havana is a very big city. I personally recommend to hire a city tour with a tour guide who speaks English, and you can easily find them in the tourism bureaus in the hotels here in Cuba. And have a city tour for about 3 hours and know the historical places as well as the modern city of Havana.
Heavy metal and Marxism-Leninism isn't the most obvious combination, and you won't find much sign of the head-banging tendency in this record shop in the center of Havana. Nevertheless, metal these days seems to be as much a part of the communist setup as May Day parades and the caring, sharing internal security police. It's come to represent about the only safe way of sticking 2 fingers up at the authorities, and its anti-establishment status here is guaranteed, because Fidel don't like it. has heavy metal music here suffered as a result of the official disapproval?
En Cuba existen pocos estudios de grabación, digamos, y pocas posibilidades de la presentación de los músicos profesionales por todo el bloqueo que hemos sufrido durante muchos años. Entonces, ¿qué ocurre? Que todas las posibilidades técnicas, materiales, se dedican a estos grupos que ya son oficialmente grupos representativos de la cultura cubana. Al ser los grupos de rock integrados prácticamente por grupos aficionados, se dejan en un segundo término. Encontrar dentro de un público que esté escuchando un concierto de heavy metal aquí en Cuba quien sea desafecto a nuestro sistema, porque eso es, no sé, es loable, ¿no?, que ocurra. Ahora, por lo general, las manifestaciones que nosotros hacemos, digamos, porque nosotros incluso como músicos también mantenemos una actitud de este tipo. Cuando estamos provocando una rebelión contra determinado o determinada cuestión social, es mediante una crítica aguda y precisa, con problemas que tengamos.
Guatote, ¿qué quieres? Oye, me dicen que tú eres guapo. A mí, todo me tiene miedo.
Ice cream was scarce after the revolution, but nowadays it's become a national obsession. Cubans will queue for hours just to eat some.
Nos bajamos, guatote. Nos bebemos la tarde aquí ahora mismo. ¿Qué es lo que pasa? Saca lo que tengo encima, que yo no te tengo miedo a ti. Palo nada más. Todo el mundo te tiene miedo en La Habana, caballero, pero yo no tengo yo. A mí no me importa que tú tengas 7 pies. ¿Qué es lo que pasa? ¿Qué es lo que pasa, guatuto? Dime. Conmigo no, porque yo de los guapos me río. Como que me río en la cara.
But if you can bear the wait, and I warn you it'll be at least an hour, Cuban ice cream is great. Ideologically sound night out doesn't thrill you, you can always come to the Tropical for a bit of bumping and grinding.
Llegó el charangón. Si no te agarra de la cuerda.
Havana is full of old ghosts, some of the most persistent of whom hang out here in the Bodeguita del Medio. If you look hard enough, you can see shades of Graham Greene and the man from Havana, Francois Saguin, Errol Flynn, and of course the old soak himself, Ernest Hemingway. When he wasn't out killing big fish and being a macho man, he was right here having profound thoughts. One of the more inspirational moments was captured up there. He says, my mojito in la bodeguita, my daiquiri in el floridita. Explanation follows.
¿Cómo? Ah, bueno. Pero si me llevan pa' qué. Pero ¿por qué, caballero? Si a mí me gusta la cerveza. No. ¿Qué va?
But if the ghost of Papa Hemingway, or the mojitos, get too much for you, you can always come next door and pig out at the Bodeguita restaurant.
Me encontré con una joven, le invité un trago de ron y me dijo muy contenta.
And the best thing is that because they take dollars and pesos, it's one of the few places where tourists can hang out with habaneros. Very subversive.
After about the 7th one, it all begins to make sense. But then there's the daiquiris to attend to.
Sankha, ¿qué pasa?
You know that socialism or death business? Well, I guess socialism gets my vote.
Oh, well, it would, wouldn't it?
Do you think anyone's still watching us?
Well, I hope so, because that guy is drop-dead gorgeous.
You know those Americans, they still haven't invaded.
Oh, they don't know what they're missing.
Is it hot or am I hot?
Don't worry, Sankha. The night's still young.
Is that the time?